Alright, today we're talking about 5.2.1, factoring using GCFs. What does GCF stand for? Greatest common factor. Two major statements that I want you to write down at the beginning of your notes. Number one, GCF is always the first step of factoring. Always. Later on, when the directions just say factor, you are going to automatically look for a GCF. Always. Every single problem. You'll get lulled to sleep by there not being a GCF, not being a GCF, not being a GCF. And then they'll throw a problem in and it has a GCF. Okay, so you always have to remember to be looking for GCF. Write that down. Always be looking for a GCF. Okay, they'll slip one in on you, and that's always the first step of factoring. The second thing that I want you to write down is that factoring out a GCF is the opposite of distributing. What do I mean by that? Well, if I've got 2x and I'm multiplying it by x plus 7, then back in Unit 4 when we did polynomials, when we multiplied a monomial times a binomial, we distributed that monomial. And we got 2x squared. 2x times 7 is plus 14x. Right? We distribute. Well, today what we're doing, factoring out by GCF, we are taking the GCF out of this binomial. We pull it out to the front. Then we're left with a binomial underneath. And it is the opposite of distributing. Okay? So to check, once we get this as our answer, we're going to check by distributing to see if we get what we originally started off with. Okay? Now, let's start off real basic, right? Understanding that what a GCF is. Middle school taught you this, right? What's the GCF of 18 and 21? Right? 3. How do you know that? Well, 18 breaks up into 3 times 6. 6 breaks up into 2 times 3. 21 breaks up into 3 and 7. What do they have? 3 times 7. What do they have in common? Well, the greatest common factor is 3. They both have a 3 in them. Right? This one has 2 3s. This has a 3 and a 7. 3 is the greatest common factor of 18 and 21. Okay? It gets a little harder as the numbers get bigger. How about 36 and 72? 36. All right, how'd you get that?
36 is half.
Because 36 is a factor of 72, then you know 36 is the GCF. Okay? All right, let's talk about this one. How about 9 and 22? What's the GCF? I disagree.
Is it 1?
It has 1. Write that down. A lot of students miss that. There is a GCF. Don't put none. The GCF is 1. The greatest common factor of 9 and 22 is 1. That's the biggest number that goes into both of them. Okay, that's middle school. I just wanted to back up a little bit. All right, let's do some variables. How about x cubed, x squared, and x? What's the GCF of those 3 terms? What's the greatest thing that they have in common? X to the what? First power. This is XXX, this is XX, and this is plain old X. What do they have in common? They all have an X. Okay, so X to the first power is the GCF. How about this one? Those are 3 different terms. What's the GCF of those 3 terms? What's the greatest value? Well, we got a squared b cubed, a b to the 4th, a to the 4th b. What do they all have? They all have an ab in common. At least an ab. What's the GCF now?
B.
Just B. They don't all have an A anymore. What's the GCF now?
B cubed.
B what?
Cubed.
Cubed. What's the GCF now?
Oh, jump.
B to the what?
4.
How come there's not an A?
Because it's not
They
common.
don't all have an A. Okay, and that's basically GCF. Let's do what we're talking about, factoring trinomials in particular. All right, so here's your first example: 5x squared plus 15x. We have a binomial. The directions may say factor. The directions may say factor out the GCF. The directions may say find the GCF. Okay, but I want you to be able to factor using GCF. What's the GCF of 5x squared and 15x?
5.
5. Do your numbers first. Scan the problem and do your numbers first. 5x squared, 15x, they have a 5 in common. How about the x's?
Just an X.
Just a plain old x, right? We got x squared and x. They both at least have an x. All right, this is very important. I need everybody's attention up here. Most students can get to this. They have no trouble figuring out the GCF and pulling it out and putting the parentheses. Filling in these two spots is where they have trouble. Okay? The way that we get that information is we're going to take the GCF and we're going to divide that term by the GCF in our head for the most part. Right? That divided. The 5's cancel out. X squared over x just gives us x. This term times this term had better give us that term. Okay? You are dividing out the GCF. Alright, what goes here? 3. Positive 3. How did we get that? We took that term, we divided it by 5x. The x's cancel. 15 over x is positive 3. And so there's your answer right there. How do we check it?
Multiple.
We distribute. What is 5x times x?
5x.
5x squared. What is 5x times 3? 15x. And we're done. Piece of cake.
That's quite
Questions?
easy.
I'll leave this one up. Let's look at another. How about 7a squared b cubed plus 14a to the 4th b to the 5th minus 21a to the 5th b to the 2nd. Alright, it's a trinomial. You got 3 different terms. You got 2 variables in each term. Your first step, break it down slowly. Right? The very first thing you're going to do is look at your numbers. What is your GCF of 7, 14, and 21?
7.
7. So we pull a 7 to start with. We know at least a 7 is going to come out. Alright, now do your A's. You got A to the 2nd, A to the 4th, and A to the 5th. What's the greatest common factor? A to the what? A to the 2nd. A to the 2nd, A to the 2nd, A to the 2nd. They all at least have an A to the 2nd. How about the B's? B to the what? B to the 2nd as well. Right? B cubed, B to the 5th, B squared. They all at least have a B squared there. That's the easy part for most students. The hard part comes putting those 3 things right there. We know that this is going to be plus because we pulled out a positive. We know that this is going to be minus. Right? Those signs don't change unless this is negative. If this is negative, then all 3 signs have to change. We'll talk about that in a minute. Alright, so now what's left? What goes in this first spot?
B.
B, I agree. Because that times B would give you that. And most of you can do that in your head. Okay, this term divided by the GCF gives you this term. Alright, what goes in the middle? This divided by this would be what?
2a squared.
2a squared b to the
Cubed.
3rd. B cubed. Very good. Questions? Anybody not see how I got 2a squared b cubed? Alright, how about the last term? What goes here? Right here, this last term. That divided by that goes here. What is it?
3 cubed.
3a what?
Cubed.
Cubed. 3a cubed. Questions? Give me a thumbs up right here if you're getting this. Pretty easy. Okay? I got 2 special cases to show you, and then we'll play the Kahoot game and you'll get a chance to practice.
Kahoot.
All right. 18x squared minus 6x. Directions say factor. Okay, you look at it. Very first thing, very first step of all factoring is what? What's step number 1? Say it. 3 letters. GCF. Always look for GCF. Say it. Alright. Alright, so what is the GCF? 18x squared 6x. The GCF is 6x. Well, here's a common mistake. Students do that, and then they write 3x, and they say, oh, I'm done.
6 minus 1.
I pulled it out. I pulled 6x out of 6x, and I get 0. Is that right? No, I can't divide a binomial by a monomial and end up with a monomial. What is 6x times 3x? 18x squared. Where'd the negative 6x go? It just disappeared. You have to have what I call sometimes a placeholder. Remember what I told you. It's this term divided by this term. What is negative 6x divided by 6x? Not 0. What is it? Negative 1. That's the correct answer. Okay? Can you see how students would make that mistake? Do you see how that's a common mistake? It is, guys. I'm not making that up. All right, how about this one? What do you think the GCF is? You would be right. But there are times when you want to pull out a negative x. The reason why is because if you pull out a negative x, what's this first term become? It becomes positive x squared. And it's a lot easier to factor when a is a positive number. And so sometimes you have to pull out a negative GCF. Write that down. Sometimes you have to pull out a negative GCF. Well, what does that do? Well, you just have to be real careful about your signs. Right? If I take a negative x cubed and divide it by negative x, I get positive x squared. If I take a positive 4x squared and divide it by negative x, what is this term going to be? It's not going to be positive. What is it? It's going to be negative 4x. See, negative times negative gives you positive. And then the last term is going to be a what? It's going to be what? Positive 1. Very good. I heard somebody say x. Okay, it's going to be positive 1. X divided by x is 1. So when you pull out a negative GCF, you have to be, look, this was negative, it became positive. This was positive, it became negative. This was negative, it became positive. And that makes sense, right? We pulled out an opposite. All of these got to be opposite. How do I check to see if I've got the right answer? All I have to do is what? Write that down. Check by distributing. I check every single one of these by distributing. And you can do it in your head. It's a quick visual check to make sure that you've done the correct thing. Questions?